All right. We're back, guys. Good to see everyone here. I know we decided to do this on a Sunday. I know we probably dropped a few people for Sunday football, but we are going to send this out to participants who are the registrants who weren't able to get here, but glad that we have a good crew of people. I see some familiar names. Valerie, Andrew, Eugen, thanks for coming. Before we get started, I'll say this. Joel had some great feedback. I appreciate everyone sending me emails and saying how helpful it was. I especially appreciate Joel reaching out saying like some of the video was a little bit laggy last time. So we're not going to be as fancy with the sort of dual screen sharing, but hopefully you guys can maximize the video so you can see my face so I can talk to you individually. Okay. We have a good amount of stuff to cover. I think what I'd like to make sure we do is get into it and get you back to your Sunday, maybe catch some of the later games. But this is going to be a really important session in terms of wrapping up our 3 parts and really getting you guys going. Okay, let's talk about housekeeping. I wanted to say thanks first. Thank you guys for joining all through these sessions. I really appreciate people showing up and asking great questions. It really encourages me to keep doing these workshops and helping founders. And I want to make sure you guys thank yourself for continuing to spend time learning and getting ready to prepare for a fundraise. The work you do before you fundraise is going to be really important. I'm not going to spend too much time here, but I just want to make sure people know that I'm not making this up. I was a venture capitalist at Graycroft for 4 or 5 years, probably 1,000 to 2,000 different decks and presentations, pitches. Was part of 50 to 100 fundraisers before becoming a venture-backed founder myself. Raised $2 million 2 separate times. Last for a company called Tape, which had a small acquisition in 2020, which helped me transition to this work, where I've been focused on making fundraising easier and more accessible for always Silicon Valley Bank's internal fundraising coach before starting my own practice with Advent Ventures. And over the past year, about 19 different founders who have worked with me in workshops and coaching have gotten funded, really impressive stories, really exciting things, and a bunch more that are preparing to fundraise. So I hope you guys, if you didn't see part 1 and part 2, make sure you go back and watch those things because it's very important as they all build on each other and really culminate in this 3rd part. I put this in every single presentation, even if you've been to the first 2, because I want to make sure that you guys find the time, extend your preparation period so that you don't wing it when you get into the fundraising mode. Let's talk about what we've covered so far and what we're about to cover. So part 1 was about what does it mean to mentally? That means better understanding what fundraising even means, better understand the investor mindset. And the ways that I encouraged you to do that were to read as many materials from credible people out there. I sent a couple links out, one's my set of essays and the other First Round Capital Review, which I think are great ways to learn and get smarter, but also make sure that you find founders out there that have raised, have conversations with them, talk to them about what their approaches were and other smart people that have done it before. And then make sure you confirm your commitment to fundraising and the process. That is going to be really important as you try to project an amount of confidence that will influence investors, but it's also important as you think about how you even spend your time, your valuable time. Are you doing this for the right reason? Secondly, we talked about building assets. So that's what part 2 is about, building the important assets that go into fundraising. So making sure you spend time building a powerful narrative, translating that to a deck and working on it so it gets better and better and better. Spending time to identify your team's support structure. So who in your network, who in your co-founders network will be there to support you, to make introductions, to give you feedback. I don't think people do that as explicitly as they should or spend time mapping that out. And I really want you guys to do that. And then lastly, making sure that you spend time researching your target list of investors. A lot of people give up on this because it seems hard and it seems like it takes a lot of time. It does. It is decently hard. It does take a lot of time. But just because it's hard doesn't mean you're going to stop at 10 investors that you're going to talk to. You're going to really want to put in the time and effort to get that really large number because a lot of this is a numbers game at the end of the day. Okay, this brings us to the very important how to launch your fundraise. How do you organize your fundraise? As you'll see me talk about, this is really important, but the parts we're going to talk about are organizing your launch, the importance of practicing your pitch, and updating your content. This is what I think about when it comes to that last phase of preparation for a fundraise before you actually get into full launch. What is the importance of organization and process when it comes to fundraising? Well, I'll start by illustrating that by asking a question. Raise your hand physically first, just hands into your camera. If you've pitched an investor ever, just hands up like this, okay? See Julia, see you, Chen, Andrew, Daniel, Volta Energy. That's not your name. Ryan. Okay, great. Lots of people. And can you put your digital hands down, please? Actually, oh, yeah, there you go. Good job, guys. All right, so a lot of people I could call on. Now, of the people that have raised, who out there has gotten a no? And now this time, why don't you raise your digital hands if you're open to talking to me about it? Digital hand raising. Okay. Great. A lot of scared people don't want to talk about their nose, but Carlton, if you could turn on your camera and come off mute, that would be awesome. Tell me what it was like to get a no. Do you remember the last no that you got?
Definitely. First of all, thanks for these sessions. Really meaningful. We are pre-launch and getting ready to launch our beta in Q4. And my co-founder and I were participated in On Deck. So we leveraged those kind of relationships to make a connection. And that investor is in two companies that we think are competitors. And they came back with a pretty quick turnaround no. And at the end of the email, we asked for feedback. He didn't give us any. So you're lost after the fact and then wondering just what did I do wrong? What can we do to improve? We're still pretty early in our process. So it was pretty frustrating.
Okay, I'll pause you there. I think I can get the gist, but neither of those felt very good, did they?
Absolutely not.
Okay, cool. I'll pause you there. I want to bring up one other person and see if we can't hear a different side of this. Cynthia.
Hi, Jason.
Hey, Cynthia.
Properly. So I started fundraising last week, and I got a no. It's essentially a no. And the answer was no right now. Let's stay in touch. And the rationale was that I was pre-revenue and pre-launch. Yeah.
But so going into it, you had a high degree of optimism. Your first pitch.
I was pissed off. Actually, I can tell you more about this. Very pissed off because I connected with the managing partner, the founding partner of this fund. They actually have a thesis around hyper-personalization, which is what my company does. Anyway, long story short, I ended up having a meeting with an analyst. And the analyst, I noticed, didn't even look at my deck because I can track that on DocSend. And he, for whatever reason, in the 30-minute call at the end, when he was asking me questions, I could tell from his questions he wasn't paying attention to my pitch.
Yeah.
So I was more pissed off about that whole experience even before I got the no. I just felt like I was wasting my time with this analyst.
Yeah. So I'm glad you shared that too, because these are all frustrations that happen during the fundraising process. You have so much confidence in what you're doing. You believe what you're doing is the right thing. And so when you get any sort of slight, any sort of no or disrespect, it feels like a punch to the stomach. I remember going out to raise for tape, and we had an all-star on paper, an all-star team, if I do say so myself, and we had the right thesis. We had a really smart idea. And when people don't see it, it really just feels like a gut punch. It takes the wind out of you. Like you're expecting this pitch to go so well. And whether it's an explicit no, which VCs often avoid. So that's what Carlton was hearing. And that's probably what Cynthia, you heard a little bit. You get this like lukewarm no, and it feels like a punch to the stomach. And this is actually why process and organization is so important. What I would say for Cynthia is, yes, it's frustrating. Yes, it's annoying. Carlton, that probably felt really bad too. But you have to run a process where you don't care. Like it has to feel like that was just one thing and you move on. But this is the mistake that founders make over and over again. And what I do is I share this quote with people, which is essentially Mike Tyson being like, everyone thinks they have a plan. Everyone thinks that they know what they're doing when they're fundraising until they get punched in the mouth. And this is one of the most important reasons why I want you guys to be spending time preparing to create a fundraising process, because you are going to get punched in the stomach. You're going to get punched in the mouth. And if you guys remember what I've talked about when it comes to narrative and founder mindset, confidence is so important. Like, it's so important in the way you are perceived by an investor. And if you get punched in the stomach and you've set up a process where you're just reeling and your head's spinning, you're like, why did they send me to an analyst? Were they pumping me for information? And you're just stewing on that before, like, for a week before your next pitch, it's not going to work out well. So I really want you guys to think about that as one of the main reasons that you organize a process. So what's another reason? Let's talk about this. So maybe some of you guys play poker. I often share this analogy about investor poker. So when do we think an investor places her bet? Let's say Julia is the bet here, and we don't know anything about her. Does the investor bet now? Or does she wait and get a deck, which is like a great flop with an ace, suited ace and 10, possibility of a straight? Do you bet now? Send in to the chat what you think. Let me tell you what it means within this analogy. The answer is that an investor will always wait to see the next card. They will never bet before they have to. So pre-flop, never. Like, after flop, never. After the river, never. After the turn, after the river, never at any stage, unless they feel like they're forced to. Okay, so that is the most important thing to think about when it comes to the game that we're playing here. I don't care how awesome you are. If an investor doesn't think they have to invest right now, Cynthia, they'll say you're early. And we don't know enough here. They're like, you're early. Saying you're early is just a cop out of saying we're not excited to invest right now. We're not excited to bet right now. And so this is another description of the most common mistake in fundraising. So Carlton, Cynthia, I don't know what your process looked like, but it sounds to be a variation of this, which is setting up multiple processes or stringing together processes, daisy chaining them together to say, we had this one introduction from on deck to a possible investor that we thought would be interesting. And then we pitched him and he tried to pump us full of information, and shit, he wasn't the investor for me. So who are we going to pitch to next? Okay, let's go find another investor and let's go pitch them. Cynthia talking to the perfect match of someone that invests in hyper-personalization, and that's what her company is, pitching them. And then for some reason, it's just an analyst and there's no heat and there's no interest. And now I have to look for the next thing. So this is what most first-time founders do. They try to string together fundraising processes. And what ends up happening is each individual process on their own is like betting without playing poker, without feeling like they need to bet. Okay. And so this is why I shared this quote with people, which is a single arrow is easily broken, but a bundle of 10 is not. This is the way you need to think about fundraising processes. Those single lines can easily turn into no's, or the most common one, which is a little bit too early right now. You know why? Because they can say that. They can say that because they're not losing the deal. They don't feel like they need to. Whereas, you know, a bundle of 10, that's the quote, but let's talk about the bundle of 50. When you've created a process where there are a lot of investors around the table, then there's something interesting here. Then there's this feeling like, other people are looking at it. And when there's some investor psychology that I often talk about in my courses, but one of the things is, could we miss this deal? Could we lose this deal? So that's what investors need to feel when they're evaluating your opportunity. Okay. And so the way I've translated this is one of my more well-known frameworks that I've written about. You can read my essay on, which is calendar density. We're talking about creating really tight processes where the outreach all happens at once. So it lands on your calendar and you create this 1 to 2 week period where your first meetings are all happening. There's tons of meetings. And so that feeling like you got punched in the stomach lasts for 5 seconds, because you know what, the next meeting is coming up. It's not for them. We've got a lot of meetings ready to go. So we got to stay ready and stay focused. On top of that, it's okay, People are feeling other pressure. People are feeling the fact that there aren't that many slots open on your calendar as they're scheduling. Like, why is that? It's probably because other investors are looking. And as you are interacting with these investors, it will become obvious that they're not the only game in town. Okay. So calendar density, incredibly important for how you set up your fundraise, but how do you get that done? Let me at least describe at a high level how this gets done. So it's all about scheduling and asking. I think people really try to think about launching their fundraisers and they just put an arbitrary random date out there. You need to be a little bit more specific about that in your head. You really need to think about, okay, when are we actually trying to get this done by? When do we have the 2-month period that we think the fundraise will last? And if we work backwards from there, when do we actually have to make these requests happen? When do we actually have to make these meetings, these first meetings happen? So we're scheduling dates. We're thinking about working backwards from timelines that you need to execute against. And then we're making asks ahead of time. So good example, Carlton, we won't bring him on stage, but it sounded like through the on deck process, somebody was like, hey, like you should talk to Daniel Downs. He's an amazing investor, Carlton, and I think he'll understand what you're doing. And Carlton may have been like, all right, let's do it. When? All right, can I take that meeting? Whereas what I actually want to see people do is say, okay, what are all the investors that we're talking to that we could talk to? How are we going to get to them? The fact that someone said they would introduce Daniel to me, awesome. Okay, I'm actually not raising yet, but good to know that I could get to Daniel in a really powerful way. So what I'd actually like everyone to do is do all that work ahead of time. Like the work we do, the research. How are we going to get to them? When people offer, thank them. File it away, make sure it's part of that list, because what you're trying to do is make all these asks and put all the requests and all the investors at a starting line, at a starting date. So that when you actually execute it and you ask for these interests all at once, that's where the concept of calendar density comes in. That's where that graph looks like it's a starting point, and all the sort of lines end at a densely populated area on a calendar. This is what's actually going to set up and create a situation where you have calendar density and you start putting pressure on a process. Okay. So creating that organization is super important. That's not all you're going to have to do when it comes to organizing and preparing for your fundraise. You're going to have to package the product up and get your pitch to a great spot. Okay. So this is where I lean on this idea of pitch, practice, and improve. In my experience, and I actually have a decent amount of experience in this, talking to founders, trying to help them. Some people think they're bad at pitching. I can help them. And some people think they're very good at pitching. Turns out I can also help those people, because whether you're bad at it or you're good at it, usually the people that think that they're good have an overblown sense of how good they are. And I don't want that to be you. I also don't want you to be that person that thinks they're bad at it and just feels I'm bad at it. The fact of the matter is you need to practice. You need to be really good at being compelling when you talk about your pitch. If you start stumbling because you're nervous, that comes off as stumbling because they don't really understand their business, or they're not passionate about their business, which could easily not be the case if you're just like, oh, like I haven't said this before. I don't know how to say these things. I trip over my words. What investors love seeing are the people that are just like, I run Adamant Ventures because I want to make fundraising easier and more accessible for as many founders as possible. I do that because I was a founder myself. And even though I had every advantage in the book, every chip stacked in my favor, it was hard. It was super, super hard. And I don't want that to happen for anyone else when they go out and fundraise. If I were stumbling against that, it wouldn't be because it wasn't true, but the perception of what I say is so important. So what you all need to do is practice and get real feedback, and get feedback from people that understand what this means. Okay. So pitch, practice, improve, incorporate feedback, and do that before you go out, because you don't want to whiff. You don't want to, you don't want to waste your shots on goal, essentially. All right. Okay. So we're getting to a good spot where I want to launch a pop quiz here. You ask for 30 intros, which is not that big of a number. I just wanted to go with something that didn't blow your minds. You ask for 30 intros, and a week later, 20 of the asks haven't responded. Raise your hand. Just talk to me if you have ideas about what this means and what you think you should do next. Okay, I see some physical hands raised of people that didn't under. Okay, I'm gonna, Yu Chen, we've engaged before. How are you? Where in the world are you calling in from?
From Bay Area.
Okay, great. All right, so this happens to you. You listen to my talk. I said, look, ask for intros. You ask for 30 intros. If they can make intros, 20 of them don't respond in a week. What do you do?
I think we should reach out again, just remind them about the previous email, see if they can pick up this time. Maybe this time from 20, I can get back 10.
Oh, okay. Pretty good answer. So let's say none of them respond in 3 days after that, though. Then what?
For the second time, I usually try, depends on if I'm like, for example, from the relationship, if I'm relatively more close to them, I will ping them again. But I usually will stop after 3 times.
Okay, actually really good answer, Yu Chen. The only tweak I would make is that I don't care how close you think you are. You're following up. So everyone here, the answer is you follow up. The answer is that everyone who is in a place to make a great introduction for you is not doing this as their full-time job to help you, Augustine. It's not their job to make introductions for you. Valerie, like, they're not thinking about you all the time. And the fact that they're in a place to make a great introduction means they're probably pretty busy. And so whether it's because they're avoiding you, Andrew, or they're just busy, it doesn't matter. Everyone follows up. You all follow up at least 2 or 3 times. What is the worst that can happen? All right. This is so important because you're not going to find every different angle into all these investors. And so you're not going to have all the options to go for an alternative. And I want you guys to follow up. I'll tell you from personal experience, like, things fall through the cracks. And if you don't make asks in the right way, people will put it off and not feel like they had to do it. And make sure you follow up, make sure you put your pride aside, make sure you don't feel this overwhelming anxiety of, oh my God, someone's going to not like me. Follow up. Okay. So this is how it works. This is the go plan in terms of getting your fundraise organized. You're going to ask for tons and tons of introductions. You're going to line them all up. You're going to schedule them, and then you're going to project manage them. You're going to make sure that, oh, some of these people didn't respond. You're going to project manage them. You're going to ask for them. Even the people that respond and say they would do it, you got to make sure they do it. That's all about project management. And then once this is all going, you're going to hit this really hard and push, push, push. So I want to just recap what we've talked about, because it's really important to think about this opportunity in front of you. Remember the opportunity you have in front of you, and think about these 4 things and how you spend time. Think about the weeks you have in front of you, the weeks and months, hopefully months you have in front of you before you fundraise, so that you can actually allocate time to do these things. Like, can you get smarter about what it means to fundraise? Can you get into the minds of investors so you understand that psychology? Can you iterate and create your narrative, iterate on it, iterate on your deck to make it tight and compelling? Can you do enough research and target investors so that you have a real large list before you start? Don't do that scramble game where you have 5 investors and they all fail, and then you have to scramble and add more. You're going to want to do all that work ahead of time, and then set up calendar density and practice. Okay. It's really important to think about. I'm going to tell you guys a story because, one, thank you guys for making it to the end of this part of the module. The reason I do this is because I've been driving people to learn, to get lots of help, to ask and research what it means to fundraise. I'm trying to put as much content out there to shine as much light on fundraising as possible. As I told you before, I was a one-on-one coach for fundraising because I have the playbook and I've been able to run people through a process. And so I'm going to transition a little bit to talking about what some of these programs mean. I appreciate you guys listening along, but I essentially was a one-on-one coach and had 100% hit rate of getting people fully prepared for a fundraise so that they could execute something that was successful in terms of raising money. But it was highly unscalable in terms of the number of people that I could affect, which is why I started creating these free workshops that would bring people in and actually educate them a little bit more about fundraising. And then people asked a little bit more about if there could be a more intense version of that, which is why I created Fundraise with Confidence. You heard a couple attendees in part 1 and part 2 ask about it who had heard about it, but that is my full fellowship program, a 5-week program that really runs people through so that when they are done, they can erase every sort of question mark around whether or not they've done everything they possibly can, that they know all the steps that they need to take in order to be fully prepared to fundraise. And so that's fundraisewithconfidence.com. Check that out. Thank you guys for spending all this time with me. If it turns out there's more, and we couldn't cover every single thing that you need to do in just a short amount of time together. But if there's more that you are interested in, please check that out. We are going to open applications on Tuesday, and everyone here will get an email about that. So do check your email at 8 a.m. on Tuesday. We still have a few things to iron out as we're trying to understand what to do, but please check your email. Let me talk you through what this is going to cover. So in each category that we covered in our 3 parts, there's much more that we could do. And so in that first category of mental prep, we really break down investor psychology, because that's what my advantage is if I ever fundraise, is that I was an investor before. And so I can get in the mind of an investor and creatively break down what I need to do to solve a situation, to push someone forward. We do a lot of exercises and sort of education to get you as close as possible to that understanding of investor psychology so that you can be creative when it comes to engaging with investors in the future. There's really detailed process breakdowns, so you know what knows what's coming. And then much more pressure testing of your founder mindset is the touchy-feely part of things that I think is just so important when it comes to running a startup and actually being successful in fundraising. In the second category of building assets, this is where some of the exercises that I walked you guys through, we go into way more detail. So it's exercises around creating decks and narratives, real iteration around it, a feedback process to make sure that you're getting different points of view on how your story is perceived. And lastly, assignments to make sure you reach those investor research goals. This is an area that founders give up on. They avoid the work because there isn't accountability. And that's so much of Fundraise with Confidence, is creating accountability so you actually hit those goals. And then lastly, organizing your fundraise so that whenever you do it in the future, that you're ready to go. But it starts with making sure you write the most impactful emails, reaching out for introductions, for asking for help, engaging with investors. It's all about timeline setup, creating a CRM so that when you're in the process, you're actually following up in an appropriate way. So you have tooling to help you with that. And then of course, live pitch training, making sure that you're able to speak in your most passionate voice. Everyone is different, but we want to make sure we put you guys through the exercises so that if you're an introvert or you're a born salesman, you do things the right way so that investors see what the opportunity is. And then the wild card of all of this is getting great people like you, putting them through a light application process so that we create community. Because I think part of my presentation was that no one does this alone. And there's a really powerful thing of putting founders together who are all going through the same battle, running the same gauntlet together, who can help each other be successful. So that is the outline of Fundraise with Confidence. And I just want to leave this up here and answer questions here. These are just a few quotes that have come up. We've been very successful. It's very early on, so people haven't even gone out and fundraised yet, but whether they actually raise money or we're getting ready to fundraise and just have all the materials prepped, we've gotten some really exciting feedback. Let's see. Going to go to some questions in the chat. Daniel has a good question around time commitment and cost. So the time commitment is variable, but every week for 5 weeks, there will be a 90-minute lecture and exercise session, as well as a 90-minute study hall, which we will create the time and space for people to actually get this work done. That's the bare minimum. There will be content to consume outside of this, but what I tell people is the people that put more time into this will get more out of it. You can mail it in, but I would say if you put 5 to 10 hours aside for this course or this fellowship program, that's when you'll really get a lot out of it. And the actual point of Fundraise with Confidence is this is all work that you should be doing on your own. This is not me running you through a fundraise, it's running you through the preparation process. So where we find this to be very valuable is that founders and CEOs are busy running their businesses. And what people have been really excited about is signing up for something that says, look, here is the time, space, and accountability to actually get some of this work done. Figuring out, should I be doing these sales calls? Should I be, coding? Should I be running these product development sprints or working on fundraising? What we'll do is we'll put slots on your calendar to be here for our exercises, to be for our study hall, and then you can schedule around that. In terms of cost, we're going to email out a full menu of how this program breaks down on Tuesday. So definitely look out for that. But the sort of core basis program is $2,450, $2,450. But do take a look at that email on Tuesday, because there'll be bands about additional support based on the feedback from the first cohort. People had asked for actually more support after the fact. There's more to see in terms of what is available with Fundraise with Confidence. So definitely check your email Tuesday morning. It'll come out at 8 a.m. I'm really excited to get people's feedback around that. Please feel free to ask questions about the cohort or fundraising. Chen, how large is large enough for the investor cohort? So depending on what stage you're at, but if you're pre-seed or seed, this is going to be a numbers game. I tell everyone their target should be 100 investors that they think they can get intros to, because there's going to be a funnel that goes from like 100 down to 80 that you think you can get connected, to 50 that you're going to get intros to. And then from there, people that will actually take the meeting. I really push people to do enough research where they can identify 100 possible targets for themselves. Look, everyone, I'm excited that we got to the end of this. I think there are a lot of great learnings for all of you. Push on these 3 categories if you're fundraising. Put enough time and effort into this. Leverage your networks to get smarter about this space. Don't be afraid to ask for help. Don't be that person that tries to figure this out on their own, or don't be that person that is scared to ask for intros. Go through all the exercises that I taught in part 1 and part 2 to make sure that you put enough effort into this to be as successful as you can be. Please take a look at the email that we'll be sending out on Tuesday. We're going to share a lot of content throughout this week to get people excited about applying. Really looking forward to the next cohort of Fundraise with Confidence. Thank you guys for spending time with me. And find me on social and connect if I can be helpful on the outskirts, even if you're not in the program.